السلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. When we look at the movement of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and how it started, one of the letters that Imam Hussein alayhi salam has, he gives to the government of Mecca. And I want to read these few lines for you when we start tonight's lecture. Inshallah, we can learn more about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, become more like Imam Hussein and his companions. He writes, and is narrated that he wrote, وَقَدْ, I'm giving you excerpts from it, parts of it. وَقَدْ دَعَوْتَ إِلَى الْأَمَانِ وَالْبِرِّ وَالصِّلَةِ وَخَيْرُ الْأَمَانِ أَمَانُ اللَّهِ. You have called to protection and good and connection. So they call, and they wrote to Imam Hussein alayhi salam that we will find for you protection. But he really doesn't trust this protection. He doesn't trust the protection of the people. As you know, in Mecca, they tried to assassinate him. They tried to kill him. So he wanted to make sure he left Mecca so the sanctity of Baytul Haram would be preserved. وَلَنْ يُؤْمَنْ اللَّهِ وَلَنْ يُؤْمَنَ اللَّهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ مَنْ لَمْ يَخِفْهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَلَنْ يُؤْمِنِ اللَّهِ. And one never is protected from God in the day of judgment unless he fears Allah in this world. So what Imam Hussein alayhi salam, instead of that fear of people, fear of assassination, fear because he is not willing to give bay'ah and allegiance to Yazid, in the second line he talks about fearing God instead of fearing the creation of God. فَنَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ مَخَافَهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا تُوجِبْ لَنَا أَمَانَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. So I ask Allah to grant His fear in this world so that we can attain protection on the day of judgment. So we have two types of fears: fear of creation and fear of creator. And when we look through people and ourselves, what are things that we fear of usually? Are they things that we should, a lot of times it's our imagination. A lot of times it is maybe a phobia we have. A lot of times this is an exaggeration. But there's a list of things that people are afraid of. Before we began, some said fear of death. Fear of death in terms of being annihilated in this world, people fear. Or, for example, fear of losing a loved one. Many children, when they're being raised, they know that their parents will not always be alive. So as a young kid, I don't know if you were like that or not, you're always worried, will I lose my mother? Will I lose my father? Will I lose my grandfather? Will I lose my grandmother, for example? And there's this fear in children because they go to funerals, they get scared. Some of these are good fears. Some of these, they have to be, understood. Another fear that many people have is failure. And people didn't mention that. Fear to fail. What happens if I fail? Many times people are afraid to do something, to say something in front of others, to do something because they think they'll fail. So therefore this fear holds them back. Either this is in their life, their career, maybe sometimes in exams. They don't want to take this course, they don't want to take this profession or study for it because they're afraid that they will fail and we won't be successful in it. 3, fear of the future. Does anyone have this type of fear? What will happen? Uncertainty of the world. Especially the world has been changing so much these last 2 or 3 years. People are always wondering, if you look at posts on social media, they're always wondering what's going to start. World War III, for example, you see this, it started. World War III has started already. It's actually not, when is it going to start? Already started. There's this fear, for example, people have of the future. For example, this can be either, climate change, can be maybe the economy, maybe world wars, for example. Fear of rejection. Many people, they have fear that I will be rejected. For example, they like somebody, they want to get married. They say, what happens if I approach them? What happens if I approach their family members and I say, I want to get married? And then they say, for example, they laugh. Say, how you want to get married, for example? Or they want to discuss his income, they want to discuss, for example, his looks, they have different things in his mind. He says, I will get rejected. Then I'll never be able, for example, to come to masjid again. They rejected me, which is wrong. Fear of financial problems. Many children sometimes, a lot of them are just fear sometimes that their parents will one day be homeless, that they will not have a home, for example, they'll be poor. Or fear of public speaking. Some say people fear public speaking more than snakes and spiders, for example. And it is scary. Myself, when I was starting, this was years ago, sometimes everyone is concerned of failing or concerned about this trust that we have, that a person is afraid. But hopefully we can raise our children in a way that they're not afraid to speak to the public, because this is something that we should not have fear of. We have to perform our duty. Many times, look at the history of the prophets and imams. The prophets or imams had to give lectures, or for example, the scholars had to give lectures, or the solahar, the good people, had to inform others publicly and not be afraid. You see, unfortunately, the evil, the wicked sometimes would get the pulpit, and they were not afraid of speaking. They were, just misguiding people. Fear of change, fear of being judged, fear of war, crime, or violence. These are things that we are afraid. I think generally also in Western culture there has been this concept of fear is one that there's no real shame. If you say, I'm afraid of this, it's like, oh, you are? I'm afraid of this too. It's okay. But should we as Muslims be like this? Should we breed fear? Sometimes people cause fear of in others all the time. Don't do this, don't do that. Every time they're talking about fear. Is this a way that a Muslim should act? We have to analyze this. Or should the Muslim be fearless? And many times, especially as the male figure who should have this masculinity, what happens if the male figure and the family is always afraid? Oh, I hear a noise, it might be a robber. He is the first one to run in the closet, for example. Doesn't defend the house. Or for example, he's always home, comes home, oh, I'm afraid I'll get fired. What happens to the wife and children, for example, when a man is always in fear of, or I can't drive, I might get into a car accident, I'm afraid of that. Everything, then he cannot function. And mother is the same way. A mother should be fearless. There are some issues, obviously, in the tradition, it's interesting. Some issues women should fear more, and some issues. This concept of fear, for example, some issues, this being more precautionary is good as protection for them. But for the male, generally speaking, men should not fear. So let's analyze this topic. Let's look at the verses of Quran. Let's look at the traditions and see what is the ideal Muslim, because we know this for sure. One of the most fearless individuals that this month of Muharram and Safar we are commemorating, remembering him, is Imam Hussein alayhi salam. If he feared, he would not fight an army of 10,000, 30,000 when he has 70, 100 people. If he had fear, he would not ride in front of that wave of army when everyone was shaheed from his friends and he was all alone except for women and children. He would not go in front and fight them. But see how Imam Hussein alayhi salam was so brave. You see today that those who love Imam Hussein, those who have learned from Ashura, are the bravest individuals. Sometimes people look at them and say, what are you doing? How can you fight against, for example, such technology, such governments, such people? What are you doing? They say, we learn from Imam Hussein. We're the ummah, we're the nation of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Much to learn from Karbala. One of them is bravery. One of them is putting away fear. And hopefully we can, analyze this topic. When we see some of the verses of the Holy Quran when it comes to fear, what is the source? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنما ذلكم الشيطان يخوف أولياءه. You see that it says, indeed it is only Satan who frightens you of his allies, for example, or frightens people. One of the works of shaitan is frightening and scaring. فلا تخافوهم وخافوني إن كنتم مؤمنين. And then the Quran continues, so do not fear them, do not fear the awliya of shaitan. Fear me if you are a true believer. So Quran is saying that shaitan and the allies of shaitan and the hizb of shaitan, these are individuals who you should not fear. And shaitan is causing the fear. But then we see in other places, الشيطان يعدكم الفقر. Shaitan promises you poverty, fears you from poverty, from incapability. Faqr means to not do. Many times, brothers and sisters, you want to do something simple, shaitan comes and says, don't do it, you can't. For example, I want to have majlis at my home for Imam Hussein, for Ahlul Bayt. You can't do it. Too many people, you can't provide the food. They're not going to come for it, for example. Or I want to sponsor a night for you, Muharram. You can't afford it, it's too much money. Right? How many things of khair, doing good deeds. I want to go to Arba'in, Imam Hussein. You can't, the trip is too long, you've got work, I get afraid of these things. Do you think how many times we were held back because of our fear, because of our worries? How many things you wish you did, but because you're too afraid, you never did? So, ash-shaytan ya'adukum min al-faqr. In this third verse, ya'aduhum wa yumannihim wa ma ya'aduhum ash-shaytan illa ghurura or ghurura. He makes promises to them, he fills them with false hopes, but Satan promises nothing but delusion. This fear that he's trying to scare you off with, his friends are trying to scare you off with. Quran says, ghurura, this is a delusion, illusion, something that's fake, it's a delusion. So therefore, when we look at the proper, appropriate manner, I think that throughout the Quran, we have very beautiful stories about how our leadership, how our prophets behaved in cases where everyone else would be afraid. Who is one of the most fearful people in the history, in the stories of the Quran? One of them is Dhul Awtad, for example. The one who is the possessor of the stakes. Who is he? Fir'aun, because what he would do, he would take people when they're alive, put them on stakes, for example, in their hands, in a way that they couldn't move anymore, and then they would die. This is the harsh death that Fir'aun would give. How many of the Bani Israel would Fir'aun kill? How many years did he have them as slaves? And they're too afraid to break free. And they would cry and they would call upon Allah to give us our munji, give us our savior, someone that will save us. And Allah sent to them Prophet Musa alayhi salam, the same individual who actually, because of the planning of Allah, was raised in Fir'aun's palace. Raised right there. It has a beautiful story throughout the Quran, even though it's not all together. You have to find other verses and put together this beautiful story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. But I want you to imagine this. That time that Prophet Musa alayhi salam confronted Pharaoh with his brother Harun, how much he must be afraid, because that same person who basically raised him, this person who's executing, killing, how difficult it is to knock some sense, to speak to him logically, to argue with him. People would be afraid. So that's one instance you see the bravery of Prophet Musa alayhi salam confronting the Pharaoh. Maybe many of you have gone to Egypt and just seen, for example, these pyramids, how much, at that time, power Pharaoh had. If you look at that time, finally, where Musa alayhi salam is going to contest, and they bring everyone, and the magicians, from the magicians, they choose the best, for say out of how many? They choose finally, tens of them, for example, to challenge Prophet Musa alayhi salam. That the Pharaoh in the books, it says he's wearing a uniform, that when the sun would shine upon him, as if he was lighting himself, And he was shining in front of the people as if he was a god, as if he was a Lord. And this way, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, with the miracle of Allah, he threw his staff and it became a serpent and it ate the others. That's one place Prophet Musa alayhi salam was not fearful. The other place, which might be even more than this, is finally Bani Israel broke free and they ran for it. In the middle of the night, they ran for it. Says, we're leaving. We're tired of being slaves. And then at that time, this huge army, this exodus of the Bani Israel, and this huge army of Pharaoh caught up to the Bani Israel. Where did they catch up to? In the Red Sea. It was a dead end. Now they ran for it, and then finally Pharaoh caught up with him. And where are they? The Red Sea. There the Quran says this: فَلَمَّا تَرَآ الْجَمَعَانِ قَالَ أَصْحَابَ مُوسَى إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ. And when the two companies saw one another, imagine, you run away from them, now you're seeing them. Oh no, in this vast army, we're talking about like hundreds of thousands of, army of like this. And the companions of Musa alayhi salam saw him, it says, Inna la mudrakun. We are indeed overtaken, they caught up to us. What are you going to do now? Pharaoh, with his past history of violence, now you ran away from him, you slaves ran away from him. What is he going to do to you guys? What is Prophet Musa going to do? Remember, the prophets have always been the most brave people, the most fearless people. One of these philosophers that, it's against Islam, he mentions, he's a British philosopher, and he says that why, for example, religion doesn't exist, why God doesn't exist. He says this, he says that one of the reasons why people have religion is because of fear. Why people believe in God is because of fear. People are afraid of things. They need a place where they have comfort. One of the scholars answers and says, if religion came across just from fear, then those who are the most religious should be the most scared. But yet we see the most individuals that are the most brave are the prophets and the imams. And you see these are the heads of religion, and they are the most fearless. So actually, if religion, the cause of it is going to be fear, then the most religious will be the most fearful of creation. Yet we see the mu'mineen, the believers, and at the top of this, the prophets and imams are the most fearless. So finally, they turned to Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Imagine if they had a prophet who was scared. Doesn't make sense, right? Does it? No. Prophet Musa alayhi salam, Quran said this. قَالَ كَلَّا. He says, no, indeed, Musa alayhi salam says, إِنَّ مَعِيَ رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينَ. Indeed, with me is my Lord. He will guide me. He will show me the way. Right now, there's no parting of the sea. There's a dead end. But Prophet Musa alayhi salam, even upon seeing this army come, they're seeing one another. And in front of him is the Red Sea. He says, Allah will help me. Allah will guide me. My Lord will guide me. Brothers and sisters, this is how we should be. There will be many times throughout your life, maybe financial poverty, maybe social problems, maybe, for example, God forbid, issues of, for example, safety, security. But yet, you have to learn from Prophet Musa. You have to, Allah place these in the Quran so that me and you can wake up. As one of our scholars say, parents, mothers give stories so their children fall asleep. Allah gives stories so the creation of Allah wakes up. Allah wants to wake us up. He doesn't want us to fall asleep. So there you see Prophet Musa alayhi salam's commanded for awhayna, now that Prophet Musa has iman, has faith, and he's leading his people. فَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى أَنِ اضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْبَحْرِ. Now hit the sea with your cane, with your staff, and it parted. فَانْفَلَغَ فَكَانَ كُلَّ فِرْقٍ كَالطَّوْدِ الْعَظِيمِ. Every portion of the Red Sea, how deep is the Red Sea? Imagine how deep it is. It became, elevated. It became, a towering mountain, each one part of the sea. So you see, this is one example in the Quran that teaches us not to be afraid. One story that we have. Therefore, I'm going to go through some of the narrations that hopefully gives us more insight of who we should fear in what we should fear. When you look at the Holy Quran, a few concepts, Quran can be divided into concepts, themes that the Quran teaches. One of them is this: death is in whose hands in the Quran? Allah's hands. So if death is in Allah's hands, should you fear something that you cannot control? Should you fear something that is in the hands of the most merciful, the most powerful, the most wise? Why would you fear that? So one thing we realize, death is in Allah's hands. Does this mean you should eat unhealthy food? Does this mean you shouldn't exercise? Does this mean you should drive like a maniac when you come to the masjid? No. No, do not do this unless you're going to be late for salah, then drive like a maniac. No, even then, do not drive like a maniac. You already have, others who are already driving like a maniac. You don't need them. So therefore, we see that Allah is saying, death is in my hands. Don't worry about it. This is the overall concept of Quran. Then all those fears that we talked about before, right? Illness, all these things, that's in Allah's hands, and it's not up to you. Why do you worry about something you cannot do? You worry about things that you're in control of. Worry about yourself. These things are in Allah's hands. How many people we had that had the most healthiest of food? Recently we had, I know community members, unfortunately, so healthy, they would always, no elevators, walk the stairs, very true brothers. And so, sometimes very young, and suddenly like this, they pass away. But what happened? Heart attack. What happened? Did he have health problems before? No. He just passed away. He just died. So we have, issues like this. So why are you so concerned about this? That be concerned by this, that afterlife. Be concerned that actually there is no death for us. It's just a transformation into another life cycle, into another cycle of life, which is what? The next stage, which is purgatory, the grave. Then it'll be, day of judgment, there'll be heaven and hell. When Allah creates us, there's no more annihilation for us. There's no real death for us. Be concerned about the next part of our lives, that is what you're responsible for. Are you responsible for living 40 years, 50? I'm not talking about health issues and all that. Yes, eat healthy. We should, because our bodies are an amanat or a trust, yes. But how long I will live, it's a maktub. It's for Allah. Allah will decide how long we'll live. Or we see another thing. Provision is in my hands. Another theme in the Quran that many people are afraid, but Quran gives us comfort. Ruzi or rizq is in my hands. Then why are you so concerned? Again, am I saying don't work? Am I saying, for example, don't get a good education? I'm saying don't, for example, get capital to start your business. No, do all this, trust in Allah. But provision is in my hands. So if it's going to be a lot or a little, remember that this is in Allah's hands. The third thing is, we constantly see, fear me and you will not fear others. Generally, this is another theme. Fear me, you will not fear others. We see in this tradition, Man khaf Allah azza wa jal, akhaf Allah minhu kull shay. Whoever fears Allah, Allah will make everything and everyone fear Him. How many of the scholars we had, mujtahideen we had, that people were so afraid of them. Not afraid meaning that they had this presence. They're afraid to misbehave in front of him, afraid to sin in front of him, for example. So therefore, when you look at these traditions and ayat, we come to the conclusion that fearing is something that we should not do. We should fear. There are good types of fear. So what are the things we should, let's give some narration about fear. First of all, the good fear is fear of Allah. This is very good. I'm going through some of the traditions here. In Bihar, the Prophet says, the fountainhead of wisdom is the fear of Allah. Ra'sul hikmah makhafatullah, fearing Allah. Or we have, for example, other traditions, A'la nas manzilatan indallah akhwafuhum min. Who are the highest in position? Who are the highest in status? The ones who fear Allah the most. They fear Allah. I was mentioned to you, what type of fear is this? Or we have three things provide salvation: fear of Allah in private, as if you see him. For verily, even though you do not see him, he sees you. Fearing as if you see him. Khawfullah. Or we have, for example, Man kana billah a'raf kana min Allah akhwaf. Whoever knows Allah the most is the most fearful of Allah. God-fearing. Then we continue and get to another sets of narrations. What are the signs of a believer? Alamatul khaif. What are the signs to know if we're truly fearful or not? The tradition from Imam Ali alayhi salam mentions, Man khafa rabbahu kaffa dhulma. The one who fears God is the one who refrains from doing dhulm and oppressing others and harming others and sinning. Do you want to know if you're one who fears God? See how you treat others. Do you do dhulm to him? Do you do oppression to him? Do you take their rights? Then you're not fearing Allah. That one who fears Allah fears mistreating others. What is the explanation of fear? We hear very beautifully, very short. Imam Ali alayhi salam, La takhaf illa dhanbak, La tarju illa rabbak. Rhymes as well, it's very beautiful. Don't fear except your sins, and don't have hope except in Allah. So you only should fear one thing, and that is Allah. You should only have hope in Allah. We continue with some of the narrations we have about fear. This hadith from the Prophet, Tuba liman shagalahu khawfullah an khawfin nas. Blessed is the one whose fear of Allah preoccupies him from fearing people. So we understand that there is an act at the end. If you ask, what should we do to remove our fear of the people? I have anxiety, I have stress, I have fear. What should I do to remove this? The tradition says, how good is that person who fears Allah so much? In this fear of Allah preoccupies and removes the fear of people from him. Have you ever felt, a very spiritual, religious way? Like maybe you're in the shrines of Ahlul Bayt, maybe you're in Hajj, maybe you're in Masjid, maybe it's a special night, and you truly fear Allah. At that time, if anyone comes to you, you say, what are you going to do? Allah is going to protect me. When you truly fear Allah, this instills in your heart, because this heart has been designed to fear. But if you're not going to fear God, then it's going to be fearful of all these useless things. You're going to have all these phobias. But when you truly fear Allah, then you just focus this. Right now I'm thinking to myself, God forbid, what happens in these sins He won't forgive? What happens if I mistreat? What happens of my future if I misbehave? How do I know I'll go into heaven? How do I know I'll go into hell? Many of us, we take this very lightly, as if we're guaranteed heaven, as if there's no way I'm going to go to hell. I imagine myself to be the one that if heaven does not have me, that's not heaven. Heaven has to have me. There's no, heaven without me, for example. Or how could Allah dare take me to hell? How could Allah dare punish me? I'm the good one. That's for the other masjid, for example, not for me. He shouldn't be punishing us, for example, shouldn't be punishing me. So therefore, if you really analyze yourself, and I ask you tonight to think, after you go home, think about these true fears that you have and how useless it is. What if God doesn't forgive me? What if I am a person that goes to hell? What if all these acts of worship that I've been doing are not accepted? How do you know your salat is accepted? Anyone here can say my prayer is accepted? You can say my prayer is sahih. You can say my prayer is correct and say, according to the hadith and Quran which this mujtahid studied, my prayer is according to this, yes, even if that is correct. If you pray in front of some of the scholars, many of them will find faults with your prayer. Let's say even if you prayed a perfect prayer, your accent is perfect, ruku is perfect, wudu is perfect, that prayer is sahih. That prayer is correct. How do you know it's a maqbool? How do you know it's correct? How do you know it's accepted? One of the ulama is the night of Qadr, night of destiny. He says, everyone here, what do you usually ask for Allah in the night of destiny, night of Qadr, Laylatul Qadr? You ask Allah for what? Forgiveness from the sins. Allah, forgive me because we've performed so many sins. He says, you are here to fear, to ask forgiveness for your sins. I am here tonight to ask for forgiveness of my worship. I'm here to ask forgiveness of my salat. That Allah forgive me for such a salat that I don't even know when I started, when I ended, what unit was I in, who was I worshiping. I wasn't salat khashi'een. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't humble in it. The salat didn't take me anywhere. I've been praying 40, 50 years. This salat didn't take me to anywhere special. I'm still afraid of the people. Because inna awliya'uhum la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. The wali of God doesn't have fear. The wali of God doesn't have, huzn, doesn't have sadness in him. But how come I still have sadness? How come I'm afraid? Every occurrence that happens, I have anxiety and stress. I don't have the opposite of this, reliance on Allah. I don't have tawakkul ala Allah. Tawakkul means what? The future, I don't know what happens. Nobody knows what will happen. But I know it's in Allah's hands. So I'm going to rest. Wakala means this. Tawakkul comes from wakala. To give someone, in a way, power of attorney. I give these affairs to Allah. Allah, I don't know what will happen. For example, my children, I don't know. Allah, what happened to my spouse? I don't know. What would happen to me? I don't know. I don't know, will I be married? Will I have kids? None of this. But I place it in Allah's hands. Allah, can you take care of these affairs for me? Oh, you did? How come if you give it to one individual, one affair, you say, oh, he's a good doctor. Take care of me. Thank you. You trust him. Or one bank or something, say, can you take care of my, I need loans. Oh, yes. But when it comes to Allah, you don't trust them. So this, when you think of it, fear comes back from the fact that we have left tawakkul of Allah, reliance on Allah. And what would happen if I had this tawakkul? What would happen if I didn't have this fear? I'd have a beautiful life. One, did you see the scholars, the awliya of Allah, how happy they are in their lives, how they don't have fear in their lives. They just do what they're supposed to. And they're the most bravest of people, the most happy in their lives because they don't have anxiety, they don't have stress. This is what Islam is supposed to bring us to, that you don't have khawf and you don't have huzn. It's Quran saying. The wali of God, the friend of God is one who does not have fear. The friend of God is one who does not have huzn. So brothers and sisters, don't breed fear. When you see things, we love to say, oh, look at that. Look what happened, for example. Look at that. This information. No, don't breed fear amongst you. You should be the most fearless. There should be a difference from you as Muslim and non-Muslim. How many battles we had were outnumbered from the beginning of Islam and Badr? Outnumbered 3-1. How many battles we had were in Ahzab, the Confederates, everyone came to destroy Islam. Everyone came, and what saved us? There's a trench that Salman of Farsi built. Behind us were Bani Qurayza, the Yahud at that time, were going to attack the Muslims from behind, and then you have the Mushrikeen in front. But then Allah brought, fear. Allah brought winds. Allah brought Ali ibn Abi Talib for their champions, and He sliced them in half. He hit them so hard that this, Darba of Imam Ali alayhi salam outweighed the action of jinn and ins. So you see how many times Allah has saved us from the beginning in the history of Islam. And we as Muslims should not fear. We should fear Allah. I should fear not performing my wadhifa and duty and performing sins. The rest I rely on Allah. If you're going to fear, brothers and sisters, you will not get anywhere. You won't get married. You won't have kids. You always say this. Oh, my kid, I'm afraid. What happens if, for example, he's not healthy? She's not. What happens if I don't have a kid? What if, for example, they don't turn out good? What if, all these what if, I'll never get married, never have kids. I'll never find a job, for example. I'll never, find any friends. What if he betrays me? What if he stabs me in the back? No. Be the fearless one. Trust me, you'll have a good life. And this is, the more you fear Allah, the more this will occupy you from fearing individuals. So many traditions that we have tonight, but we have run out of time. I'm going to see if there's anything. I think basically we've covered it. So to conclude, Allah places death in His own hands. Allah places our rizq, our provisions in His own hands. Shaitan gives us fear, but shaitan gives us delusion. We have to think straight as Muslims and truly be sincere and work for Allah. Allah will give us victory. Allah will give us a good result. And every time we saw that person who worked for God, did things for God, and feared no one else but Allah, they were truly victorious. May Allah, inshallah, make us of those who are fearless, inshallah. May we learn from Imam Hussein, Ashab Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to be those individuals who always does what is right, especially when it comes to resistance and fighting against oppression. We should not be those who are always fearful. What if they get me? What if they come after me? What happens, for example? I should fear, what if Allah's punishment comes upon me? You didn't help the mazloom. You didn't help the oppressed. This is something I should truly fear for. Ya Allah, make us, inshallah, of the khaifeen. Make us only have fear of you, inshallah. Make us of the awliya, because the awliya have no fear, and the awliya have no huzn, no sadness in them. Ya Allah, we ask you, forgive our sins, inshallah. Accept our majalis for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Connect us more to Ahlul Bayt. Connect us more to Imam Zaman, inshallah. Allow us to truly love Imam Zaman. Allow Imam Zaman's tender heart to love us, inshallah. And forgive our departed, cure our sick, and make us of the companions of the Imam of the age, and expedite his return with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahu. Hajj Kazim, are you sure you know what you're doing? The streaming is done? So do you have any questions tonight?